वेलकम स्टूडेंट्स। अभी हम डिस्कस करेंगे वन डे रिवीजन शॉर्ट्स क्लास 10th सैम्पल पेपर का सोशल साइंस का टर्म 2 का वन डे रिवीजन चैप्टर इंडिया एंड द कॉन्टेम्प्रेरी वर्ल्ड का नेशनलिज्म इन इंडिया द ग्रोथ ऑफ मॉडर्न nationalism is connected to the anti-colonial movement. People began discovering their unity in the process of struggle with colonialism. The Congress, under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi, tried to unite each class and group together within one movement. The First World War, Khilafat and Non-Cooperation Movement. The First World War 1914 created a new economic and political situation worldwide. India faced various problems during the war period. For example, defense expenditure increased, custom duties were raised, and income tax was introduced. Third point is prices of food grains was increased and doubled between 1913 and 1918. Villagers were recruited forcefully in army. After the war in 1918, 19 and 1920 to 1921, Indian industries faced heavy losses. People suffered from acute shortage of food, influenza epidemic, etc. In such a critical situation, a new leader of Mahatma Gandhi came to India from South Africa in January 1915. The idea of Satyagraha. Gandhiji's method of movement and protest based on truth and non-violence was known as Satyagraha. The idea of Satyagraha emphasized on the power of truth. In 1917, Gandhiji traveled to Champaran in Bihar to inspire the peasants to struggle against oppressive plantation system. In the same year, Gandhiji also organized a satyagraha to support the peasants in Kheda district of Gujarat. Next, in India, in 1918, Gandhiji went to Ahmedabad to organize a satyagraha movement amongst cotton mill workers. Next is the Roulette Act. The Roulette Act was passed through the Imperial Legislative Council in 1919, but Indian members opposed the act. According to this act, the political prisoners could be detained in prison for up 2 years without any trial. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट आपको दे रखा है ऑन 6 अप्रैल 1919 गांधी जी लॉन्च्ड ए नेशनल वाइड सत्याग्रह विद ए हड़ताल. On 10th April 1919, the police in Amritsar opened fire on peaceful procession. Martial law was imposed in Amritsar and the command of the area was given to General Dyer. Next is Jallianwala Bagh Massacre. On 13th April 1919, a large crowd gathered in enclosed ground of Jallianwala Bagh in Amritsar, Punjab. General Dyer blocked the exit point of the ground and gave order to open fire on the crowd. Hundreds of people were killed in this incident as the news spread. Strikes, clashes with the police, and attacks on government buildings started. Rabindranath Tagore returned to his title knighthood during the incident. Mahatma Gandhi called off the Satyagraha movement when he saw a spread of violence. Next is Khilafat movement. After the First World War, rumors were spread that a peace treaty was going to be imposed on Khalifa, spiritual head of the Islamic world of Ottoman Empire. A Khilafat committee was formed in Bombay under the leadership of Maulana Azad, Hakim Ajmal Khan, and Hasrat Mohani. Muslim leaders Muhammad Ali and Shaukat Ali began discussing with Gandhiji about a united mass action of Khilafat issue. Gandhiji saw this as an opportunity of uniting Hindus and Muslims. The Congress passed the resolution in its Calcutta session in September 1920 to start a non-cooperation movement in support of Khilafat as well as for Swaraj. Next is non-cooperation movement. The non-cooperation movement was adopted by the Congress during the Nagpur conference in December 1920 and it began under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi. Next is differing strands within the movement. In January 1920, the non-cooperation Khilafat movement started. Various social groups participated in the movement with their own specific aspiration. The movement in the towns, the non-cooperation movement, Khilafat movement started in the cities with the middle class participation in which stu- students and teachers left government-controlled schools and lawyers left courts. Foreign goods were boycotted, liquor shops were picketed, council elections were boycotted in most provinces except Madras. However, this movement gradually slowed down for many regions, like expensive khadi clothes were not suitable for poor peoples and no alternative institutions were set up. Next is rebellion in the countryside. From cities, the non-cooperation movement spread to the countryside, means villages में. Peasants movement in Awadh. In Awadh, peasant movement developed under the leadership of Baba Ramchand, a sannyasi who had earlier been in Fiji as an indentured laborer. The peasant movement demanded a reduction of revenue, abolition of beggar, and social boycott of oppressive landlords. In October 1920, the Utkushan Seva was set up. It was headed by Jawaharlal Nehru, Baba Ramchandra, and a few others. Next topic is tribal movement in Andhra Pradesh. In the Gudem Hills of Andhra Pradesh, a militant guerrilla movement spread in the early 1920 under the leadership of Aluri Sitaram Raju. Raju convinced people to wear khadi and gave up drinking according to Gandhian ideas. Raju was captured and executed in 1924 and gradually he became a folk hero. Next topic is Swaraj in the plantation. According to the Indian Immigration Act of 1859, plantation workers were not permitted to leave the tea gardens without permission. When the news of non-cooperation movement spread to the plantation, they left their jobs and headed towards their home. However, they were caught by police and brutally beaten up. Towards civil disobedience movement. In February 1922, Mahatma Gandhi decided to withdraw the non-cooperation movement. Chori Chora incident was the main reason behind withdrawing the non-cooperation movement. The Chori Chora incident occurred at Chori Chora in Gorakhpur district of United Provinces on 4th February 1922. Different views within Congress. Some leaders within Congress were tired of mass struggle and wanted to participate in the election to the provincial council set up by the Government of India Act of 1919. C.R. Das and Motilal Nehru formed the Swaraj Party within the Congress. Some younger leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose argued for more strong mass agitation and for full independence. In the situation of internal debate and discussions, two factors shaped Indian politics towards the late 1920, which were the first was the effect of worldwide economic depression. The second was agriculture prices was began to fall from 1926 and collapsed after 1930. Next is formation of Simon Commission. Simon Commission was constituted under John Simon. The main objective of Simon Commission was to review the functioning of the constitutional system in India and suggest changes in the system. Next is Indian leaders opposed the commission as there were no Indians in it. When the commission arrived in India in 1928, it was greeted with the slogan Simon Go Back. Next topic is demand of Purn Swaraj. In October 1920, the Viceroy Lord Irwin announced an uncertain offer of domination status for India and a round-table conference to discuss a future constitution. In December 1929, under the presidency of Jawaharlal Nehru, the Lahore Congress formalized the demand of Purn Swaraj or full independence for India. It was declared that 26th January 1930 would be celebrated as the Independence Day. Next topic is the Salt March and the Civil Disobedience Movement. On 31st January 1930, Mahatma Gandhi sent a letter to Viceroy Irwin which claimed 11 demands, including the demand to abolish salt tax. Irwin was not ready to talk upon the demands. Thus, Gandhiji took the decision to launch the movement. Next topic is the Civil Disobedience Movement. On 12th March 1930, along with the 78 followers, Gandhiji started Salt March from Sabarmati Ashram for Dandi, the coastal town of Gujarat. On 6th April, he reached Dandi and broke the salt law. This marked the beginning of the civil disobedience movement as the movement spread. Foreign clothes were boycotted, peasants refused to pay revenue and chowkidari taxes. Village officials resigned. Forest peoples violated forest laws in many places. However, British government arrested all the traders including Gandhiji. Calling of the civil disobedience movement. During civil disobedience movement, peaceful satyagrahis were attacked, women and children were beaten up, and people were arrested. When Abdul Ghaffar Khan was arrested on April 1930, several violent incidents took place in Peshawar. In this situation, Mahatma Gandhi called off the movement and signed a pact and with Lord Irwin on 5th March 1931. This was called the Gandhi-Irwin Pact. Next is topic is relaunching of civil disobedience movement. In December 1931, Gandhiji went to London for the second roundtable conference, but the British government refused to release the prisoners. When Gandhiji came back in India, he found that Congress had been declared illegal and Abdul Ghaffar Khan and Jawaharlal Nehru were imprisoned. As a result, Mahatma Gandhi relaunched the civil disobedience movement. The movement was continued for a year and lost its momentum by the year 1934. Next topic is how participants saw the movement. Meaning of Swaraj was different for different social groups. In the countryside, rich peasants communities like the Patidars of Gujarat and the Jats of Uttar Pradesh were supporters of civil disobedience movement. For them, the fight for Swaraj was a struggle against high revenues. Next point is the poor peasantry found it difficult to pay their rent to the landlord as the depression continued. They joined a variety of radical movements, often led by socialists and communists, in the hope that they would not have to pay the rent any further. The Indian merchants and industrialists like G.D. Birla, Purushottam Thakurdas, etc., supported the civil disobedience movement in the hope that business restrictions would be lifted. They formed the Indian Industry and Commerce Congress in 1920 and the Federation of the Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industries FICCI in 1927. The industrial working classes did not participate in civil disobedience movement in large numbers except in the Nagpur region. A large number of women participated in this movement. Women were inspired by Gandhiji's call and they began to see service to the nation as their sacred duty. Next is formation of Hindustan Socialist Republican Army. In 1928, some nationalists like Bhagat Singh, Jatin Das, and Ajoy Ghosh founded the Hindustan Socialist Republican Army (HSRA) in 1928 at a meeting in uh, Firoz Shah Kotla ground in Delhi. The limits of civil disobedience movement, Dalits or untouchables and Muslims did not actively participate in this movement. Gandhiji called the limits of civil disobedience movement was Dalits or untouchables and Muslims did not actively participate in this movement. Second point is Gandhiji called Dalits Harijan or the children of God. He believed that Swaraj would not come for hundreds years if untouchability was not eliminated. He organized Satyagraha for them to secure their entry into temples and access to public wells, tanks, roads and schools. Gandhiji himself cleaned the toilets to dignify the work of Bhangi the sweepers. Gandhiji argued the upper class to change their mindset regarding the untouchables. Next is stand of Dalit leaders. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar demanded reserved seats in educational institutions and a separate electorate that would choose Dalit members for legislative councils. Ambedkar organized the Dalit into Depressed Classes Association in 1930. When the British government admitted Ambedkar's demand, Gandhiji strongly opposed it and began a fast unto death. Next is Ambedkar ultimately accepted Gandhiji's position and as a result Pune Pact of September 1932 was signed. This pact gave the depressed classes reserved seats in provincial and central legislative council, but the voting was to be done by the general electorate. Next is Hindu-Muslim clash. After the decline of the non-cooperation and Khilafat movement, a large section of Muslim left felt separated from the Congress. From the mid 1920s, the Congress came to be more associated with openly Hindu religious nationalist groups like the Hindu Mahasabha. As a result, Hindu-Muslim communal clashes and riots occurred in various cities. In 1930, Sir Muhammad Iqbal, the president of Muslim League, demanded the importance of separate electorates for Muslims. Difference between Hindu Mahasabha and Muslim League. The only difference in the opinion of Congress and Muslim League was based on the representation in the future assemblies that were to be elected. The leaders of the Muslim League, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, wanted reserved seats for Muslims in Central Assembly. He was willing to give up the demand for separate electorate for two conditions. First, Muslims were assured reserved seats in the Central Assembly. Next is representation would be in proportion to the population of Muslim domination provinces Bengal and Punjab. Next point is in 1928 at the All Parties Conference, M.R. Jayakar of Hindu Mahasabha strongly opposed the demands of Jinnah. Next is the sense of collective belongings. The sense of collective belongings developed through the experiences of united struggle, history, fiction, folklore, songs, popular prints, and symbols. All plays this, all plays, all played a part in the making of nationalism. The identity of nation is most often symbolized in a figure or image. The image of Bharat Mata was first created by Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay in 1870 when he wrote Vande Mataram for our motherland. The image of Bharat Mata was first painted by Rabindranath Tagore. In Bengal, Rabindranath Tagore and in Madras, Natyasa Sastri collected massive collection of folk tales and songs, which led to the movement or for folk revival. During the Swadeshi movement, a tricolor red, green, yellow flag was designed in Bengal. It had 8 lotuses representing 8 provinces and a crescent moon representing Hindus and Muslims. By 1921, Gandhiji had designed the Swaraj flag. It was a tricolor having a spinning wheel in the center representing the Gandhian ideal of self-help. Nationalism through Indian ancient history. Another means of creating the feeling of nationalism was explaining the meaning of history again. The nationalist writers argued the readers to take pride in India's great achievements in the past and struggle to change the miserable condition of the life under British rule. But unification of people involved some problems when the past that was being glorified was Hindu and the images celebrated were taken from Hindu iconography. द पीपल्स ऑफ अदर कम्युनिटीज फेल्ट लेफ्ट आउट। ये पूरा आपका नेशनलिज्म इन इंडिया की पूरी समरी है। अगर आपको कोई डाउट है तो आप पूछ सकते हैं कमेंट सेक्शन में। आप देख रहे हैं यूट्यूब चैनल दर्शन सर सोशल साइंस यूट्यूब चैनल पर पूरी चैप्टर की समरी।